Good morning and welcome to the Joint Committee on Finance and Committee on Ways and Means. May the Secretary please call the roll.
Canizaro. Dondero Loop. Here. Neal. Wen. Here. Stone. Here. Taylor. Titus. Here. Assembly members Anderson. Backus. Brown May. Here. Dickman. Here. Hafen. Here. Hibbets. Howdigi. Koenig. Here. Mosca. Here. O'Neill. Here. Torres Fawcett. Here. Watts. Here. Yeager. Here. Chairman Moreno.
Thank you so much. Please mark Senator Neal and Chair Monroe Marino absent excused, and please mark Senator Scheibel, Assembly members Anderson and Howdigi present when they arrive. With that, on today's agenda, we have our judicial branch as well as the judicial discipline Commission, and we will go ahead and start with our judicial branch. And if you don't mind, just a reminder, when it's so unnatural for us probably who are in the courtroom to say our names each time we speak, but if you all remember, if you're sharing in the presentation, to state your name before you present, that will be great. And then I don't think we have anyone else online or anything, but with that, we'll welcome our judiciary branch and we'll go ahead and open our hearing on our first budget item for the judicial branch for an overview. And with that, feel free to begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Douglas Herndon, it's D-O-U-G-L-A-S, last name H-E-R-N-D-O-N. I'm the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with everyone this morning. And with me is Justice Lydia Stiglich, our Court Administrator, Catherine Stocks, our Chief Financial Officer, Todd Myler, our Assistant Court Administrator, John McCormick, our Chief People Officer, Emily Kuhlman, and Paul Embley, who is our IT guru. Hopefully, amongst the team of us, we'll be able to answer any questions you all have after we go through our presentation. We appreciate very much the opportunity to be back before you to discuss our budget request with you. And we are very thankful to all of you who are gracious enough to give us some time over the past couple of weeks so that we could answer any questions or concerns that you all had and get some insight into the issues, to the extent there are any, with our budget request. And we do understand that there are some concerns. This is our first time going through building our budget in the way that you granted us the authority to do during the last session. And hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions, as I said, but most importantly, we're here to work with you and your staff as we move forward getting our budget approved during this legislative session. Our budget authority and the actions taken during this biennium are pursuant to our inherent authority provided in the Constitution and the specific authority under the NRS. We are deeply thankful to this body for clarifying our budgeting guardrails as part of SB 58 during the 82nd session of the legislature. Specifically, our personnel budgeting was clarified to model that of the office of the governor. I believe very strongly that we have acted in good faith in trying to maintain compliance with the guardrails that were placed upon us through the closing documents as well as SB 58. We surmise there may be disagreement in the boundaries that were enacted with SB 58, but I again assure you that we have not acted in any way to be at all disrespectful to the guardrails that you placed upon us with regard to how we put together our budget. If you believe that we have not complied with those guidelines in any way, then the responsibility of that to bear is mine as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. But I know how hard everybody has worked to be in compliance with that because of our gratitude to you for granting us that authority to oversee our budget and our procedures in the way that we had long sought. And again, we're here to work with you all in any way needed so that we can continue to move forward. The closing documents provided at the end of the 82nd session had reporting parameters as part of establishing the personnel model like the office of the governor. Those boundaries were also codified through SB 58 in Chapter 1 of the NRS. And we've worked diligently to be open and transparent about how we've moved forward since then and to be in compliance with those requirements. We have maintained the judicial branch staff budget in one account without any transfers of general fund appropriations between budget accounts and fiscal years. We have not sought nor required supplemental personnel appropriations in either fiscal year. We reported quarterly to the Interim Finance Committee information including all salary adjustments, position classification changes, and additional full-time employees, also required by Section 13 of SB 58. We provided individual position data through the Nevada Executive Budget System and updated that information directly to the Legislative Council Bureau staff in December and again as part of our budget response prior to this hearing. And we provided enhancement decision units in future budget submittals for recommendations for new positions and/or increases in the total funding level of salaries approved by the legislature. On item E, if the legislature does not agree with the court that routine merit and shifting to on-call for 24/7 e-file support is considered adjusted base, the court is prepared to create a budget amendment to move that amount into an enhancement. With that, I'd like to turn things over for now to begin with Todd Myler to start a more specific discussion of our budget requests. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, my name is Todd Myler, Toddmyler. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Supreme Court. This slide shows just a general overview of the entire budget for as submitted, as currently constructed. Later on in the presentation, we will get to two different adjustments that related to the surveillance system upgrade and potential separation from OCIO. We will discuss those issues later on in the presentation. But as you can see, the total funding as currently constructed is $197 million. 14.7 of that is contained in one-shots, which we will also briefly address later on in the presentation. With that, we'll discuss some staffing personnel, and I'll turn some time over to Justice Lydia Stiglich.
All right, Lydia Stiglich, L-I-D-I-A-S-T-I-G-L-I-C-H. Thank you for having us. To the Chair, I'd like to address this slide here on staffing and personnel. The new funding mechanism that was set up in the last legislative session, SB 58, allowed the court, within the limits of available money, to employ such persons as it deems necessary to provide appropriate staff for the judicial department of the state government, and that we shall determine the salaries and benefits of those persons employed pursuant to the subsection 1, which allows us to hire, and adopt rules and policies that it deems appropriate to establish the duties and employment rights of the persons employed pursuant to subsection 1. We have operated within the funding we were given in the current biennium and acted in good faith to report all of our actions pursuant to Section 13 of SB 58. To do that, we appeared 5 times at the IFC. The first 3 times we had nothing to report. And in FY 24, on our 4th report, we wanted to understand kind of what we had in our budget, this being a new way to do it. And at that point in time, we had the opportunity to kind of consider what we would need and what we could pay for within our appropriation. So we did report all of those increases, and we had created 8 new positions over the course of the biennium within the funding mechanism. And we reported those to IFC. We appeared in front of IFC 5 times. Well, we brought reports to IFC 5 times. The 6th time we had nothing to report. We never had a question. We were never called to the table for any further information, which we were available to provide. That said, the reason that the 8 positions that we created over the biennium, 7 of which were tech, or which were IT, 6 were direct IT, and 1 was somebody to operate our webmaster, to operate our self-help portal and all those other issues. So we'll say 7 were IT, and 1 was an additional attorney. The reason those were not included as enhancements this kind of round is because they weren't enhancements. They were created consistent and pursuant to the legislative appropriation that you provided us last time. We paid for them with that. They're within that still, and that is why we opted that we did not create those as enhancements, because we didn't understand that they would be enhancements. It's still our original appropriation of money. And again, I'm going to just tell you what we're thinking and why we did what we did, and we can discuss if you like it, if you would like that a different way. Come forward, this slide represents our asks above the last appropriation. So the first is there's 10 new positions requested. 7 of those you'll see are ARPA contractors. We had 20 ARPA contractors, or we have 20 ARPA contractors. When we complete all of our technology and projects, we're asking that 7 of those 20 be converted to FTEs, and that's to maintain those new programs that we'll be talking about further down in the presentation. Asking for 1 new statewide specialty court support position, that's an administrative position to assist the statewide coordinator, and 2 new marshal positions, and that's to assist the court in covering and security for both courthouses. Those are listed as enhancements. With respect to merit increases, the court in its adjusted base had asked that merit increases be restored. In efforts for us to understand what amount of money we had in the appropriation to manage our staffing budget, we suspended merit increases. And so to that end, we would like to restore those. And that is why that is part of our adjusted base. Now, should that have been an adjusted base or should that have been an enhancement unit? I can tell you the reason that we put it in the adjusted base is because initially we didn't necessarily know where to put it, so we looked to other agencies. And the way executive agencies do it is they, at least as we understand it, they build the merit into the adjusted base. So can it be an adjusted base or can it be an enhancement? That's up to you and your sound discretion, and we're ready to work with it, with whatever you look at, and we're ready to look at those amounts in terms of how you want to proceed. But that is the ask. That also would include the fact that now that we have e-file system, both that we run for our own court and that we run for much of the state, we now have to support on-call 24/7 IT. So that's also part of that. So it's restoring merit to some extent and 24/7 coverage on e-file. So that is where the staffing personnel piece. And I would note, in terms of how we proceeded in the past, because I think, past is prologue, in FY24, we reverted $1.7 million of our staffing money. This time, we're on track for another sizable reversion. I don't have the exact dollar, but kind of in that ballpark. So we have really sincerely tried to operate with fidelity to what we discussed last session. But we're open to fine-tuning, we're open to accounting in the way that the body is most comfortable with. And with that, we'll move on.
Once again, Todd Myler for the record. We're happy to report the Supreme Court Training Center, which you gave us an appropriation last time of $1.4 million. Is open. It is not quite completely built out yet. We're still waiting for installation of the technology, but we held our first training 2 weeks ago, and it went very well. If you look at the picture there, I would just highlight my favorite feature of the room is the column that stands right in the middle of the training center. That's there because that is load bearing for the entire building. And we didn't want the Supreme Court to fall from the 3rd floor down into the Law Library's new training center. So without a significant increase in cost, we kind of had to live with that column. So we will call that the pillar of learning, I guess. We appreciate it. It is going to be made available for other public entities to use. And I would just highlight the email address there at the bottom of the slide with any questions related to that. We've set up policies related to it, and we'll entertain reservations. Alongside with that, last legislative session, you approved 4 new FTE for our judicial education unit. In conjunction with this new learning center, we have polled the courts across the state to find out what training they need and developed a comprehensive continuous learning plan, we call it. So this request in the aggregate reflects our needs in order to implement that plan. I would just highlight for the committee one small piece of that, and then I'll turn to Catherine Stocks to discuss more of the continuous learning plan. There's one small piece for the Supreme Court's budget in Decision Unit E125. As part of this continuous learning plan, we are focusing more on training staff, and one of the conferences, well, the only conference that's available for appellate court attorneys out there is from the National Association of Appellate Court Attorneys. There's a conference that they do annually. There really is no other resource to teach these attorneys how to be appellate court attorneys. We would like to be able to send more staff to that. And so there's a small request of about $12,000 per year. I believe we would be able to send approximately 4 new attorneys to that, depending on location. It does move around the country, but if it's in a mid-level location, we believe we'd be able to send 4 new attorneys to that. With that, for a deeper dive, turn it over to Catherine Stocks.
Good morning. Catherine Stocks for the record, KATHERENESTOCKS. And as Mr. Myler said, this continuous learning plan, this next slide shows that it is broken out to various categories. That was one of the initial questions I believe we got in the pre-budget hearing. And category 43 is the actual trial court staff and training. And in the attachments for this hearing, the approved continuous learning plan is in there. That document shows the core training and course topics that have been requested by court staff across the state. And in that, we have then the request of $171,000 per year. That does include 4 in-person trainings. Part of the survey included a question about how we could best deliver education to our courts, and the result ended up being doing a northern and a southern, with rural courts being able to choose and separate their staff because of the small amount of staff. You can't close the whole courthouse for employees to go to in-person training. So the thought is that the smaller courts would be able to divvy up their staff between north and south so that everyone would get the training without having to come back and necessarily have some employees that miss out on that training. It is a hybrid option. There are both live in person, live on demand, live in person, live online, and then also on demand modules. We have found that the requests from the courts were so extensive, we actually can't get all of the training done within only a couple years. So we actually are in the process of prioritizing that. We will do the best that we can to provide on-demand training from our existing resources. The in-person training, we won't be able to afford that travel without the appropriation. As far as category 44, the New Judge Academy, I don't know if anyone here had heard about the success of the first pilot one that we did in Las Vegas. We had 18 newly elected Justice of the Peace attend this academy. The Regional Justice Center hosted it for us. It's an opportunity for our new judges to come together and they actually observe court, and then after observing court, their mentor judges take them with bench books going through what it's like to be a new judge day one on the bench. The intent of this is in addition to the statutory requirement that our judges go to the National Judicial College. Those National Judicial College courses are general jurisdiction or limited jurisdiction and are a broader scope, and they are tailored not to Nevada, they are for all judges across the country. So while they get general information about what a judge needs to learn, our New Judge Academy that we piloted in December was specific to Nevada law. And our judges actually enjoyed it enough that before our limited jurisdiction judges conference in January, they did a day beforehand to get back together with their mentor judges to talk about what they've seen in their first couple weeks on the bench. We would like to be able to do this for the upcoming district judge. That election will be in November of 2026, and they will then take the bench in January of 2027. Our intent would be to host this in December of 2026 after the election. Category 45 is Rural Judges Conference. This came out of the strategic planning and then the surveys about education of rural-specific topics, because those judges are handling much broader dockets and don't necessarily get the ability to specialize. So this is to address topics that our judges need training on and request. 46 is Regional Council CLEs. Right now, our Judicial Council has regional councils, and we have regular meetings among those judges. There has been a request that we would be able to have the AOC organize continuing legal education as part of those meetings. So the request is for us to be able to organize that and get staff out to those meetings to conduct the CLE, or if there's an expert that needs to come in, doing an honorarium or that type of paying for mileage to come participate in those CLEs. And then finally, it's water law. The request for the water law isn't for us to host a conference. It's the, I have to look up the actual name. The water law, it'll be the Western States Water Law Consortium through the National Judicial College. The amount there shows that we would pay $37,500. The Judicial College has offered up $12,500 to meet the $50,000 requirement for the Nevada state. It's a one-time payment is our understanding for this group. And then we have 7 judges to attend the Dividing the Waters conference. So the next set of slides I will briefly go over. It's our IT projects. If we get into specific questions, we will call up our CIO after the fact. So we just wanted to also highlight, yet again, us being thankful for the appropriations we've received, because we have made progress with our ARPA-funded projects. As we have stated, e-file has already been deployed. We are well into the process of the C-Track system, which is the appellate court case management system, and that will be a cloud-based modern utility for us to upgrade that system. You gave us general funds in the last session to get the project started, and then we now have a request for funds to finalize it. Our guardianship portal, we are ahead of the country on this. This is our IT department going above and beyond to identify ways that we can learn from other states that have strong guardianship portals. Ours actually will be able to integrate financial reports directly from the banks, and through processes that are beyond me, it can actually identify, the system would be able to identify red flags in deposits or withdrawals from those accounts to help our courts be able to identify at-risk funds to then send over to our guardianship investigations team for further investigation. Finally, the financial separation. This is a success we brought up in the last hearing, but our accounting is now through NetSuite, and our human resources and payroll are through ADP. Those went live right at the beginning of the biennium, and we haven't looked back, and we are thankful for your support in being able to move off of the state system and onto our own. These next set of slides are just going to highlight one-shots because we wanted to just provide a little more information. As I said, our OCIO can provide more detail on those one-shot requests. C-Track, this is the completion for the appellate court case management system. CourtView 3, this is the statewide case management system. At the moment, it is at least 33 courts that would move over. We are in negotiations with 7 other courts to move over. Part of the cost of moving over, that would be courts that are not already on our CourtView. And with the appropriation with the one-shot, we would need that to help migrate data from those other courts. But this would expand the number of courts, and specifically district courts that are on the CourtView 3 system. E-filing. This is one of our highlights. We are up to over 12,000 filings in the 10 courts that are using it. We We just sent out an updated strategic planning survey across the state. We had 300 respondents. We had around 70 attorneys respond. The overwhelming support of this E-Track program, it was all over the written comments of expand e-filing, expand it, expand it, expand it. So we are asking you for those final appropriations that we can get this deployed through the rest of the state. It's the integration with the case management system that is the piece that will get us across the finish line to get this deployed. And then courtroom AV upgrade. This is, we have two different sets of systems in the Carson City and Las Vegas courthouses. When the Las Vegas courthouse was built, it was, we're looking at 7 years on that technology. The AOs, and then the Supreme Court here in Carson City has even older than that. The attempt here is to create the same system across the board, which reduces our reliance on individuals to run the equipment. Some of the other pieces are that it improves our accessibility and our streaming capabilities. And really, it's the seamless conferencing integration is another important piece related to this request. So I think, yes, that is the last on those one-shots. So now on to OCIO separation. This is one that Mr. Myler mentioned we would talk about. Simply put, as we understand, there is uncertainty in our what is going on a national level related to federal government support. One of the areas that has come up as a concern for us is the Cybersecurity and Information Security Administration. We have verified, independently verified some reports that there may be shifts in priorities within that agency. We heavily rely, all of us heavily rely on CISA to proactively protect us from state actors. The judiciary is a known target of state actors. We don't know what that landscape looks like today, and we have a limited amount of cybersecurity personnel because we have depended on CISA over the years. We, at this point, would like to meet with staff after this hearing to flush out some of the information because this is very fresh. We don't want to make a jump that could end up impairing our ability to protect from attacks. And sophisticated state attacks continue to occur. They are spoofing multi-factor authentication. That is a highly sophisticated action. And so we just ask that after this hearing, we might be able to have a follow-up meeting on the OCIO separation.
Once again, Todd Myler for the record. On to some travel and training enhancements that we have. I'm sure the committee is aware that the cost of travel is just going up. The cost of travel to Las Vegas is significantly increased. We have noticed, we used to regularly get plane tickets in the low 300s. It's now costing. We are grateful for what the state negotiated during the legislative session to get cheaper flights between Las Vegas and Carson, or in Reno. But after the legislative session ends, we're going to see them jump right back up to over $500 per ticket like we were seeing before. Other costs that have gone up, the GSA rates that were approved recently in the fall, we are finding are just not sufficient, even in Las Vegas. In the rural communities, it's very difficult to actually find hotels that are secure within the GSA rate as well. With respect to Las Vegas, the resort fees just keep climbing. Parking is no longer included in those in many of these properties. And so just generally speaking, it's getting more expensive, and I'll get to that in a later slide related to inflation. But as far as our enhancements go, We have 4 of them related to travel and training. The first is E303, that's within the AOC's budget account. This is for IT staff travel to accomplish several things. One, more management oversight between supervisors in both locations with their staff. We have a dynamic IT staff that is spread between both locations. And a limited number of supervisors to be wherever they're at. They need more support. We have additional trial court support that our IT staff would like to be able to provide, particularly in helping as we roll out the statewide CMS and the e-file programs to provide training and teach these people in person in their own environment how to use these systems. We also have our stats team that needs to go out and review how our trial courts are using their case management system in terms of turning in the data to report how courts are managing their caseloads. So this is one piece of that request is $33,000 per year. The next one is E309, also within the AOC's budget account for our people operations unit. That's a little over $15,000 per year. Again, we have staff in both locations, and in Las Vegas, there is HR staff support needed just to train, to help out, to be a resource for our staff there. And there's also a small request for registration for the GSMCon, which is a social media conference that is held in Las Vegas. We would like to send somebody to that so that we can keep up on social media trends. E306, this is a request from our central legal staff in order to send supervisors again to Las Vegas on a monthly basis. What we've found is in-person support and training opportunities from a supervisory attorney to the staff attorneys is invaluable. And we'd like to be able to make sure we have enough to be able to send them down on a monthly basis. E311 is the Court of Appeals. It's about $28,000 per year. One thing that happened prior to the pandemic, I would say during the pandemic, the travel budget for the Court of Appeals just unfortunately did not remain at the level that it needed to be for prior to the pandemic. We are trying to restore that so that they can make more additional trips, perhaps do remote oral arguments in locations not in Carson City or Las Vegas. It is good to do this kind of outreach for the communities, for them to see how courts work. We'd also like to send 11 additional trainings for judges and staff. And so this again would be, some of those would be attorneys attending that NACA conference that I mentioned earlier, which is really the only opportunity for these attorneys to be trained on how to be appellate court attorneys in the country. So those are the enhancements related to travel and training.
Catherine Stocks for the record. Just a quick expansion on the travel and training piece. Tab 6 in the handouts for today include a breakdown of what Mr. Myler just described. This was in response to the pre-budget hearing and the question about what is going on. So there is a little bit more detail there for you. We, in lieu of hiring additional support or supervisory staff in each location, that is what the majority of this is for. We also, though, the IT travel or going out and doing training, what has happened is that our audit unit that you authorized all of our new positions for, they have gotten up to full staffing so far in this biennium, and they are doing group audits to get our auditors out into our trial courts. We are well on our way to getting all courts audited. So far, as of yesterday, since July 1, the audit team, with all of the hiring that was required, have completed 13 trial court mass audits, 5 follow-up audits, two specialty court audits. We are now getting out there as an influential and respected voice for the Nevada judiciary. Our auditors are leading that charge with their ability to gain the trust of our courts to ask us for help in advance if they have a question. We've now had 22 independent requests for support from our audit unit since July 1 of 2023. That means we're getting out there before that 4-year audit cycle. We're getting out there because they're asking us for help. What also has come out of that is that we're finding process training opportunities for our courts. In the last 6 months, we've been deployed out to Elko with a team to help their new clerk's office. Their longstanding clerk left, and some of that knowledge and other support staff within that clerk's office left, and you had a brand new clerk's office that was trying to figure out how to run a court and run an election at the same time. We went out and provided that support. We've been regularly helping the Hawthorne Court, but what we're asking for in this enhancement is to be able to go out and continue to provide that support so that when courts identify that they have a training gap and need some support, we're able to go out and do that.
Todd Myler for the record. We have a number of other enhancements. Just want to highlight quickly. As has been mentioned, the guardianship portal, we want to complete that project and also make sure we have sufficient funding to continue the system and keep it live through the biennium. This funding will allow us to keep it licensed and keep it live. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, E-292 and the 1494 Supreme Court, we would respectfully just request that this be withdrawn at this time. We have identified funding in the current fiscal year and worked with a vendor, and they are able to come in and give us the upgrades now. So we are removing this $330,000 enhancement. And I will certainly work with staff to effectuate that and whatever they need. E316 is for the Supreme Court Settlement Program. This program receives all civil appeals are funneled to this program to see if there's an opportunity to settle it before it gets to the justices or the Court of Appeal judges. It is very successful. It has approximately a 40% success rate. The funding for this program has not been increased for quite some time. I believe it was 2015 that was the last time that the fees charged by the settlement judges were adjusted. This would allow us to continue recruiting those settlement program judges and continue with the program.
Douglas Herndon for the record. Yeah, our settlement program, for those of you that aren't aware, when civil appeals come into the court, a settlement judge is appointed to those and all briefing is suspended. So attorneys and litigants aren't utilizing time and money trying to litigate the case through the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeals at that point in time. Rather, they're directing their efforts to try and settle the case. And there's a finite amount of time that they're allowed to do that. The settlement judge has some authority to extend that if necessary. But the idea is to save time and money by settling the case rather than it have to go through a lengthy appellate process. If they're unable to settle it, then the court steps back in, we institute the briefing schedule, and then it'll move forward as you know, other cases would. But as you can imagine, there was a lull around the time of the pandemic with filings within the appellate court system. That has started to pick back up. We hit our 90,000th case filing last month, and we're approaching pre-pandemic numbers in filing again. And so since it's been about a decade since there was an increase in that funding, we perceive the need that if we can get an increase in that funding, it's going to be greatly utilized to continue with the settlement program and hopefully continue its efficiency. So we appreciate that.
Todd Myler for the record. The next one is E285. We have a number of we would like to ask for contract IT staff in order to maintain our legacy systems. As we've mentioned, we're modernizing in a bunch of ways, and our IT staff right now is doing everything they can to focus on really two things at the same time. And as we get further along in these projects, existing staff needs to shift completely to making sure we're able to implement these new systems efficiently, on track, and in order to maintain all the old legacy systems before they can be turned off, we need additional contract staff in order to do that. And so this request, we believe, will allow us to navigate that transition. The next one is E-136 for the court interpreter program. We would like additional training funds to provide before the fact training for our prospective interpreters. The testing that they go through to become certified is difficult and very comprehensive. There's an oral test and there's a written test, and they are intense. We believe there will be more success in passing and becoming certified if we are able to provide more training ahead of time to prep these prospective interpreters. This really is an access to justice initiative to help people that don't speak English in the courts, and we do have a shortage of interpreters. We would like to be able to increase that as much as we can, and we believe training is one way to facilitate that. And then finally, we have a $0 enhancement, an E900 would transfer the guardianship program from the 1494 Supreme Court budget to 1483 AOC. Next one is on inflationary adjustments. As I mentioned before when I talked about our travel enhancements, costs have just increased across the board, and it isn't just travel. That's why we have a number of these inflationary adjustments. We understand that generally speaking, the executive branch did not include inflationary adjustments in their budget. I don't know what to say other than I'm sorry they didn't do that. But they are experiencing the same increases in costs that everybody else is. Why they didn't, I don't know. But we feel like what we are asking for is reasonable based on what's happening out in the market. M110 is, again, for that travel and training. So what I mentioned before was related to increased travel and training that we want to do. This is to allow us to keep travel and training at the same levels that we have been, but just for increased costs. The intent of M110 was to ask for a 25% inflationary increase. We based that on GSA increases for hotels and meals, along with those increases I talked about in airfare. As I mentioned, hotel resort fees are continuing to go up. Rideshare rates, depending on when you fly into Vegas or even into Reno, those are getting more expensive as well. M111 is for operating supplies, and M112 in postage. Those ones are fairly small. We have seen a recent memo from the Department of Administration related to mail services costs going up. As you are aware, the Postal Service seems to increase their costs anecdotally every other week, but that keeps going up as well, and postage needs to increase. Office supplies, we are seeing regular increases for pretty much everything we do just to maintain our offices. M114 is related to membership dues. As we have professional membership in organizations across the country, as I mentioned, NACA for our appellate court attorneys, we have membership in with the the National Center for State Courts. All those are going up as well. We have M115 for publications. This is approximately, across the court's budgets, about just a 4% increase for publications. We do purchase a lot of publications, particularly in our law library, but also in the Supreme Court's budget and the Court of Appeals. We would respectfully request an increase there. And then with respect to the specialty court conference, this is a kind of a unique situation. In FY24, we held the conference in Sparks, and we experienced what we would consider unusually favorable terms from the venue that we held it at. So the costs for the 2024 conference were significantly less than we would have normally experienced. The intent is that we don't always hold it in the north, but that we would every other year switch between north and south. If the next one's going to be held in Las Vegas, we expect that one to be more expensive. But that is out of courtesy for all of our people across the state, and it hopes that we would get more people from Las Vegas to attend in Las Vegas, and vice versa. So that's a quick rundown on our inflationary adjustments. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we have our one-shot requests. The first two requests are for CMS and e-file. These dollar amounts are what we would need in order to finish the projects. As you are aware, the funding for ARPA, which has funded these projects up till now, expires on December 31st of 2026. However, I don't believe that we will have any money left that long into 2026. I believe that will be spent earlier than that, but these pots of money we believe will finish us off for the remainder of the biennium. E-284 is the Supreme Court CMS. This is the C-track system that is separate from the other CMS. The statewide CMS is for the trial courts. This is for the Supreme Court and Court of Appeals. You approved this through one-shot funding in the 2023 legislative session. We are asking for additional funding to finish off that project as well. E-283 is the courtroom AV upgrade, which was mentioned earlier. We do need to sync up those systems and modernize them. The equipment is getting more expensive to replace, and the systems don't talk to each other very well. So sometimes our streaming is a challenge, and getting the technology to sync up and actually allow for a seamless hearing sometimes is a challenge. E-282, this is a request to upgrade the Multi-County Interjurisdictional Information System, or MGIGIS. I'll just say MGIGIS from here on out. MGIGIS is an information system that talks between courts, DPS, and other law enforcement partners to transmit things like warrants, TPOs, various things related to public safety, and you will probably recall that we have asked for little pots of money pretty much every biennium. I've been with the court since 2018, and every biennium prior to this, we have had MGIGIS upgrades in the budget. Every time a new document is required to be filed, we need to rewrite parts of the system in order to accommodate it. What this request would do would allow us to make it an evergreen system, meaning we can upgrade it ourselves as we go along, and don't need to contract heavily with the contractors that we have in the past to do that. So even though the price tag here is a little bit more than those requests we have seen in the past, we believe we won't need any more after this. And then finally, the E710 replacement equipment. This is standard replacement equipment that would normally go in the regular operating budget. However, the governor's finance office approached us during the budget process and said, we would like to pull all E710s out of the operating budgets and put them in one shots. And we said, okay. So that's why that one's on the list as well. So with that, we appreciate the opportunity to be here to present our budget request. And Chief?
Douglas Herndon again. Chair, Senators, Assembly members, thank you again for your time. Obviously, as you all know with our budget request, there are things that are very specific to the appellate courts, but as you can see, there's also so much of what we do that isn't really about the appellate court system, but it's about our obligation to support and contribute to the court systems around the state as best we can with one core principle in mind, and that is access to justice. Everything that we can do to provide support to those courts and improve them helps improve access to justice in urban areas and in rural areas. Our efforts in training and auditing, our case management project efforts, our e-filing project efforts, all of those things are sought as part of our budget, as our obligation, as the head court system in the state to support all those other court systems and their needs so that they can best provide access to justice for the constituents within those communities. So thank you again for your time. We're here to answer any questions. I'll allow Justice Stiglich as well if she has any comments right now. No, she has no comments right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, administrators and justices, for your presentation. With that, we do have some questions from our committee members, and I will start with Senator Scheibel.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you for presenting your budget to us. It is nice to see you all here. I did want to start with some of the inflationary adjustments. Excuse me. I'm specifically looking at M116, which is for the specialty court conferences. Absolutely, I am happy to see that we're going to be funding specialty court conferences and continuing our work on developing Nevada specialty courts. The amount that is listed in here, though, for the inflationary costs in general is pretty specific. It's at 25.2%. And I was wondering if this number had some significance, if you could explain where that calculation is coming from.
Todd Myler for the record, Madam Chair, through you to the Senator. So that number, the base budget for the Specialty Courts Conference is a line item of $250,000. We looked at it, and while we could have dissected this in many different ways to try and come up with, one that doesn't have 4 zeros at the end of it, we said 20%. So a fifth of what we had in the line item is what we went with. We feel like that would allow us to get the conference in there. I hope that's responsive.
I think so, unless my math is off, though. The amount that you've calculated in this budget is 25%. 0.2.
Okay, so there are two different inflationary requests. The intent for our general travel and training budget is that we would ask for about 25%. I believe that's the number you're referring to. The specialty court conference was not calculated in the same manner. So that's why that number is so round.
Okay, I think I do understand what you're saying. And so I have a second question on the same budget, which is about the increase in cost for facilitators. We're looking at a 300% increase for facilitators, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Todd Myler for the record. I don't have the specific line item in front of me, so I don't have those numbers with me at the moment. I would be happy to go back and look at that and get with staff to discuss that further. I will say when it comes to facilitators for our conferences, we're experiencing the same type of increases. We used to be able to find speakers with an honorarium that used to be a lot lower. That is creeping up. As far as speakers for, in relation to specific conferences, there are some that we need to go out and get on a national level. Some we can handle within the state of Nevada. But I'd be happy to look at more detail in that with staff if that would be helpful.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And also, you all can go directly to the senator or assembly member asking the questions. You don't have to go through the chair. With that, I will go to Senator Nguyen.
I think what we're all looking for just across the board is a little bit more detail on some of the inflationary increases. Some of them seem pretty specific. I understand when you're talking about postage, from 2023 to 2025, the price of the stamp has gone from 63 cents to 73 cents, I think it is now, maybe 74 cents. So those are some very specific things. With some of the subscription services for the law library and print materials, I think you have definitive costs and how those inflationary costs were increased. But then when it comes to some of these specialty court conferences, I think we would like some more detail on how some of these determinations were. I realize that facilitator costs may have gone up, but it seems like completely arbitrary, and it's given away by a flat number from 3,500 to like 10,000. So if we can follow up with any more details on how you're justifying some of those like seemingly more arbitrary inflationary costs, I think that would be helpful. I have kind of a follow-up question to this enhancement decision asking for an additional $50,000 in fiscal year 27 for the specialty court conferences. And I'm wondering if you could give me the reasoning behind that, because in looking at the last biennium and the money that was allocated for the biannual specialty court conferences, you didn't even use all that money. So I'm wondering why you anticipate going forward that you will need this additional funds, including the inflationary costs, when you didn't even use the money from the last biennium.
Catherine Stocks for the record. On this position, we, as Mr. Myler stated, we did get very favorable terms when we hosted this last conference. However, if we want to host the conference in Las Vegas, the reality of the food and beverage cost in Vegas is significantly higher in Reno. If you would like us to show like RFP estimates on the cost, the difference between hosting in Reno and Vegas, if you don't approve the inflationary amount, right now at the last conference we were able to hold 280. We would like to expand it. We could go back to Reno and do it again in Reno. It would just be a different conversation. We would have had larger participation from the South had we have not required that travel. Those core teams that travel, it's not just court employees, it's the entire specialty court team. By having it in Vegas, we can significantly expand because less people do need to travel, but it does increase your food and beverage for the daytime piece. It's just, hosting something in Vegas costs more, but if you would like, we are happy to provide RFP estimates that show why it would cost more in Vegas.
May I follow up, Chair? When it comes to that, are you including travel for the people that would, if it was to be in Reno and people had to travel, would you be responsible for those costs? Like, are we just, by saving money on having it in Las Vegas where there's maybe increased costs for facility use and like food and beverage, are you saving money on travel, or is this kind of a wash?
Todd Myler for the record. It's a little bit of a nuanced answer. The numbers that you see on what the FY24 conference cost us, we were also unusually surprised by the number of travel claims that we did not receive. We anticipated more, quite a bit more, in terms of travel claims that just did not materialize. They may still come in. One thing that my staff would tell you, and I will tell you, is that getting people to turn in travel claims is surprisingly difficult sometimes. We do wrangle the cats. We do, follow up up to a point. So it's entirely possible we may have more travel claims coming in for this particular conference. Giving you a dollar amount on that, I can't. I don't know how many are going to do that. With relation to the difference in travel between having it in Vegas or in Reno, I anticipate that there would be a difference in number of people traveling to that. Again, how many of them will actually turn in the travel claims? I don't have a crystal ball on that one. Could it be a wash theoretically? But again, the cost of those conferences in Vegas is just so much more. We just feel like we need more.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll go to Assemblymember Watts.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question about training, specifically the new hybrid training facility. So I saw kind of in the overview, there's new spaces available. With the addition of that, are there any meeting room costs that were included in the adjusted base budget or enhancements that could be reduced as a result?
Catherine Stocks for the record. We are not charging for that. We had the flat cost of building it out. Anyone using the space, there will be no cost for that. However, individuals are responsible for their own cleaning. But as far as being able to remove costs associated with ongoing maintenance of that, it does not apply the way we have it set up.
Thank you. I think, so my question was, are there any other meeting costs in your budget that could be reduced now that you have this space available?
Todd Myler for the record. So with the hybrid training facility, that facility is designed, we had the space that we had, and we're going to be using that as the main part of it is going to be used for events related to the continuous learning plan. Like I'll move to this slide here. We will be holding a lot of trainings for court staff to come to Carson City to hold those trainings there. Those are currently not trainings that we do right now. So the answer of will we be able to remove anything from the adjusted base related to conferences as we have that, the conferences that we hold are much larger than our space will accommodate. So for example, the specialty court conference, we had 280 enrollees in that conference. There is not a space, we would have had to build an entire new facility just to accommodate that many people. The judges conferences that we have, the district judges conferences, the limited judges conferences that we have, also too big for the space. So I think the short answer is we don't believe there are any costs in adjusted base that could come out as a result of opening the Learning Center.
Thank you for that. And then other question I had is also training related. It kind of relates to a few different decision units. So, you talked to us about the comprehensive continuous learning. And then we also saw later in the presentation a couple of decision units, I think E311 around the Court of Appeals and E309 in Administrative Office of the Courts. I know in that it talked a little bit more about travel for training. But again, can you just give us a little bit of background on the differences between those and why that's not included and why in kind of the continuous learning and why those are kind of separated out?
Catherine Stocks for the record. Actually, on tab 6 of the handouts, we have those decision units broken out because it can seem a bit confusing between the continuous learning plan travel, which is bringing people in, and then our expansion of the good work that we're doing, but not hiring additional FTE in Las Vegas. So specifically, E309 is our people operations team. That's for we do regular onboarding of if we have an off-cycle judge come in, we actually partner, especially if it's with the 8th Judicial District, we travel down and participate in the 8th's onboarding of their new judge. So that is an unexpected trip for us as part of that onboarding. And we also, when we do have new employees come on, instead of having a full-time equivalent employee in the Las Vegas courthouse, we do travel down for that onboarding as necessary to save funds. But this is, the reality is we are doing well, and so we were given 30 new employees in the last biennium. With our appropriation, we have more employees, and so we do have more onboarding requirements than we did in the past. We also have expanded our position postings to be in Las Vegas and Carson City so that we can get larger applicant pools, which has paid off. But also that does mean that we have a mismatch in supervisory structure. We have more supervisory structure in Carson City from more tenured employees, and so we do need to travel down to Las Vegas. So the Court of Appeals piece as well. Those new staff attorneys, when they come on, they do need some one-on-one in-person mentoring. Does that answer your question?
Thank you so much. Next, we will go to Assemblymember Torres Fawcett.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for the presentation. It's great to see you all again. I know that in fiscal year 2025, there was originally $2,000 allocated per year for the Supreme Court justices and $789 per year for the Court of Appeals judges to travel. So can you address a little bit more, and I know you talked about it a little bit during the presentation, but just for the record so it can be clear, why you're currently recommending increasing the base budget out of state travel authority to $3,500 per year.
Thank you for the question. Todd Myler for the record. So the out-of-state travel budget prior to this biennium had been parked in policy at $2,000 per justice and should have been written in the budget as $2,000 per Court of Appeals judge. That was a mistake that we're trying to rectify in terms of the Court of Appeals budget. With respect to the increase, this is something that kind of harkens back to the discussion about inflationary. We sort of kind of know pretty well how much it costs to travel within the state of Nevada. When it comes to leaving the state of Nevada, we go to conferences in Washington, D.C. or New York or these other places. The only thing we know about that is $2,000 is no longer adequate. We have a conference in New York. We're lucky to get away less than $3,000. Lucky. Washington, D.C., same thing. So the increase in the out-of-state travel that you see there is really just so that we can accommodate if a justice needs to leave the state to attend something, they have enough there to do it. Otherwise, we have to dip into other pots to subsidize that.
Thank you. And if I can continue, Chair, I wanted to go on to talk a little bit about the continuous learning. Could you explain a little bit more how the recommended amounts for the comprehensive continuous learning plan were determined?
So the travel piece for this, Catherine Stocks for the record. Thank you for the question. With two conferences between the staff, that's 4 in the biennium, it ends up dividing it up. We're looking to train 80 to 85 people in each of those conferences. And with those being extended days, that's where we came up with the number. I'm trying to flip to that particular tab.
This is for budget item E125.
Yes.
To be clear.
Too much paper, I apologize. Okay, yes, so it was $171,000 each year, including 4 in-person training events over the biennium. So that is roughly $85,000 per conference to host multiple day training for our courts. So the continuous learning plan has 15 modules that we would teach, 15 training sessions within the modules that we would teach in those conferences. Essentially, you have a north component and a south component. And that's where that $85,000 comes from. If you would like us to break it down by individual and cost per individual, we're happy to do that.
Thank you. And another follow-up to that, how many non-state judicial staff, including trial court staff, is the recommended funding anticipated to train annually?
We believe we'll be able to have conferences of between 85 people in attendance each time. Based on how the continuous learning plan is structured, those may be the same staff attending more than one, and they may be new staff. It depends on who's available when. The courts can't completely close their doors to send all their clerks at once. So there will probably be quite a bit of tag teaming going on at the local level to determine who gets sent to that. But we believe 80 to 85 within those conferences. And just with respect to the cost of those, this is based on, we do lots of conferences already. And we've had a lot of experience with these. We feel like this is a reasonable cost for a conference of that size.
Mr. Myler, if I may follow up on that, I think what my colleague was asking was a lot of the district court judges' staff is actually county staff. And so the question we were asking was how many of, because we understand 80 to 85 people may be attending these conferences, but of those, how many are going to be non-staff, state judicial staff that may be attending? We're trying to understand that a little bit better.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. My name is John McCormick, J-O-H-N, McCormick, M-C-C-O-R-M-I-C-K, Assistant State Court Administrator. And to answer that question, the focus of the continuous learning plan are those locally funded employees that support the judicial officers. So we're talking, the clerks and those sort of folks. So those trainings in the continuous learning plan are aimed at those folks to further professionalize their ability to serve the citizens of the state and provide access to justice. And with our weird bifurcated, I'm opining and saying weird, but our bifurcated funding model, because your judicial officers at the district court level are the only state employees and everybody else is county. So in order to teach those folks, it's a focus on the non-state judicial officers and the actual staff provided by the local funding authorities.
Thank you for that. So the 80 to 85 was 100%. I appreciate that. Okay. With that, I actually have a question regarding decision. Well, it's on the additional computer hardware and computer software licenses and maintenance contracts. And with that, kind of looking at the numbers that were provided with the budget, it looks like on certain programs, the actual amount would be used if it was a higher amount than the budgeted amount. If the budgeted amount was higher, it was utilized, if that makes sense, than the actual, and then an inflationary number was added on that. So with my question is, the judicial staff provided a list of licenses, maintenance contracts for the computer software and computer hardware with its recommended budget, along with the inflationary increase of 8%. Why was the budget amount used as the base amount when the actual amount in the current biennium was less?
Todd Myler for the record. I'll defer to our CIO here in a minute, but I will say that as I've worked for the court since 2018, the technology changes that we have faced just in those 7 years have been significant. And balancing current needs versus what has happened even 6 months ago sometimes is a significant challenge. And in terms of ensuring that we had sufficient budget authority to be nimble and allow IT to change with technology changing so quickly, we looked at every single line item. And of all the people that we built this budget with, I think Paul and I and my staff spoke more than anybody else regarding what to do with this. And that is the general environment that we're trying to make sure that we have sufficient authority to make those changes as technology changes. Additionally, I would say that in the general IT industry-wide environment, we are seeing a significant shift from what used to happen in the past, where you would buy a piece of software once for a license, you'd install it on a computer, and it was good until either the computer died or you needed to upgrade it. That is no longer the case. Pretty much across the board, what we're seeing is IT companies have figured out what a lot of other industries have figured out. When you sign up as you need software, we're going to make you pay on a yearly basis for that. So there have been a number of things within the IT realm that have dictated that we need to be able to be more nimble. And looking at the budget versus using the actual versus the budgeted number. We needed to give ourselves enough leeway. So when the decisions need to be made, this no longer meets our needs, but this will, we can shift. But also we can then, in those cases where the billing model is going to change, we can also shift there, and that's going to be something that we unfortunately just have to deal with our softwares. I don't know if Paul Embley would have anything to add to that.
Paul Embley for the record, Paulembley. Did that answer the question?
You know, I'm going to rephrase it. I don't know if nimble is the right word or cushion is probably the right word, but how I'm hearing this is basically in those situations where the actual cost was higher than what was budgeted previously, the actual cost was taken into consideration, which I understand because the cost of the software is, the licensing fee is greater than what had been previously budgeted, but then we may anticipate an inflationary increase on that. But for those other items where the actual cost was actually lower than the budgeted amount, what I'm hearing is that the budget amount was taken because it was greater, and that would allow a cushion on top of the additional 8%. Is that accurate of what you kind of were explaining to me? And it sounded like you may be changing licensing if there's like, and I get it, there's sometimes like softwares no longer are being sold or compatible, so you have to change, and I wasn't sure on that part, but I kind of understood the part that there's being a cushion left because of the fear that the costs are going to go up for the licensing.
Paul Embley for the record. You're asking a great question, and I've worked, as Todd said, quite extensively with their accounting group. So one thing that's very hard to show in a biennial spreadsheet is when we get 3- and 4-year discounts. And so that is part of what you're seeing. I have actually gone through in every single one of those where the actual is significantly less than I've lined those out with explanation. I would love to be able to send that to you so that you understand why it is that each one of those has a significant discrepancy. When it's $1,000 or less, you know, I didn't put any explanation behind it, but we would welcome, you know, trying to help you understand why it is that we need more than what it looks like we're spending.
And we'd appreciate it. You can give that to our staff. That would be great. Thank you so much for that explanation. With that, I will go to Senator Nguyen.
I have a couple of questions about kind of going in line with some of the modernization efforts that we have around, that you have around the case management system and some of the other IT programs that we were able to utilize those ARPA funds to start those programs. I know that you have some one-shot requests in order to make sure that we're able to complete those programs that will kind of bring in that integrated system. But in the meantime, some of those, do any of those judicial branches existing positions, including the 12 new information technology, these 12 new IT positions that are seeking to be added in the current biennium, do they currently maintain the court's legacy systems? And how many of those people are maintaining the legacy systems that would be needed to work on, I guess, the systems going forward in the future?
Lydia Stiglich, to the senator. Yeah, I want to make sure I understand the question. There's a line item E285, that is the contract IT staff for the legacy systems. And then there's an ask to convert of the 20 other contractors, 7 to FTEs. Is that, I want to just make sure we understand what you're asking.
I'm kind of talking about them too, so I'll just clarify. When we're talking about the existing positions, including the 12 new information technology positions that were added in this current biennium, how many of them currently maintain the court's legacy systems?
To this, Lydia Stiglich, to the senator. Senator, we added 6 IT positions. So with respect to, I think you're indicating 12. I want to make sure we're talking apples to apples.
Yeah, there's the 6 FTEs, and then there's the 6 contract positions.
Okay.
And I think they're currently funded with ARPA funds.
Okay.
Okay, I think I understand. So yes, the positions that we are asking for, and in conjunction with the 6 that we created already, as I mentioned before, our staff right now are in the midst of doing that juggling act. We are asking for in E285 to bring on contract staff so that they can shift fully to the modernization. So the tasks are being completed by existing staff right now. The new staff we're asking for, the 6 that would be converted into contractors, those are not for legacy systems. Did that answer your question?
It does. And so what staff is currently maintaining the legacy systems?
Paul Embley for the record. So of the 6 that we hired last biennium, 2 are in there that are supporting legacy systems that are transitioning to the cloud, and we will keep them on. We have one IT guru who's amazing. We pay him well, we feed him food and all of that just to keep him, with us. But he is the sole support for the Supreme Court case management system. So we used 2 positions from the last biennium to make sure that we are not solely dependent upon him. And those are the only 2 that are doing legacy systems. The rest are maintaining or will be maintaining the new systems.
Okay, thank you. Kind of moving on to another program under the AOC E301 pocket of money there. Can you tell me what benefits are anticipated with the development of the electronic portal for the guardianship program? You kind of referenced it in the presentation, but I was wondering if you could give some more information about that, as well as the projected annual ongoing costs for that portal, including software licenses and maintenance contracts.
Paul Embley for the record. Okay, sorry. So one of the huge benefits is in all the guardianship portals that we know of, there is an annual reporting, so a guardian would need to actually send in their annual report, and that is the first time that we would have any knowledge that somebody was misspending funds. With this guardianship portal, we will actually integrate so that that information is fed to us real time. So if somebody, if grandma is theoretically going to Saks Fifth Avenue twice a week and buying clothing, that would automatically red flag, because we know that grandma is not going to be buying clothes twice a week, at a high-end store. And so it's things like that. There's many more nuanced things that we could provide to you as far as red flags, but that is one of the things that is probably the most significant most significant difference between the guardianship portal that we're doing and the ones that already exist in other states.
May I follow up, Chair? I think what I'm looking also at, and just to clarify some of the ongoing costs potentially associated with this portal, is I'm trying to decide if this is like a duplicate, if there's duplication in here. So when I'm looking at the software list that you provided, the adjusted base budget includes software for the guardianship program, including the ALTIA, is that how we're saying it? ALTIA, financial investigator banking software. That's how it's listed in that adjusted base budget. And the software for the guardianship and audit teams of $25,250 in fiscal year 2026, and the $27,270 in fiscal year 27, and the out systems, I'm going to put that in quote because that's how it's listed, software for the guardianship portal of 55 in fiscal year 26 and 59,400 in 27. Are you familiar with where I'm at in the budget? I see that is kind of listed there, but is this funding for existing software in addition to the funding software requested in Decision Unit E301? So I'm trying to decide if that's duplicate, if there is still additional funding that's needed, if you can kind of address some of that. It would clarify for our fiscal staff.
You specifically mentioned Altia, and that is a system that is outside of the portal. It's one that our investigators use directly when they receive paper documents or they receive information from banks, for instance. Mostly they request documents, bank statements, directly from banks rather than getting it from those that are involved in the case. When they get those documents, they are it's paper, and it's a very manual process to take the data from that and enter it all into spreadsheets so that they can then start crunching it. In this particular case, the Altia software is used to upload that document into Altia, and it populates it for them to reduce errors in data entry and also speed up the process of starting it. So that manual entry that they were doing before in Excel took many, many hours with each one just to make sure they got it right. The portal itself doesn't accommodate that type of arrangement with the banks uploading. So the software, the Altia was initially purchased for guardianship for the investigators to use. We've also found that it has been very useful for our court auditors as well. They are using the same system. So we're getting kind of a 2-for-1 in terms of Altia to allow our auditors to do the same type of thing. So with relation to Altia, they are two different systems, and we need to maintain both of them. Were there other systems involved that we need to address, or did that clarify?
No, I think that helps clarify it. I wasn't clear whether or not those were two systems that needed to correspond together, or if it was one system, and whether or not the maintenance and the software still needed to be included if it was in the other thing. So I guess if the funding for the guardianship portal is recommended in that decision E301 if it is not approved, would that Altia financial investigator banking software and the OutSystem software included in the base budget still be needed?
Yes.
That's kind of what I was wanting to make sure, that no matter what, even if we didn't have this guardianship portal, you would still need this for the other programs. That's all my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Senator. I just want to make a comment. I know we have a question coming in from the judicial branch's request to move certain services away from OCIO. Because as we saw the backup materials, we noted that it was a lot of issues with ongoing internet connectivity challenges and just some other challenges. But I understood that during the presentation, Ms. Stokes had indicated there were concerns about cybersecurity issues, and always our staff is happy to reach out to chat with you all about that issue. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Senator Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. And good morning. Thank you for being here. Thanks for the presentation. I'm glad you started that conversation, because my question, I think I just have one, is as you separate, right, from OCIO, from the executive branch, and that, what are the ongoing costs that you anticipate to support your own unit as you pull that out?
Paul Embley for the record. Thanks for that question. So really, the ongoing costs are salary for the 3 cybersecurity personnel that we have. There is equipment, but that is on a evergreen kind of plan. So We tend to purchase all of our network equipment with a 10-year license. So in, 5 more legislative hearings, we'll be coming back and asking for more money there. But so we really don't anticipate that we will have additional costs because of the equipment that we already have in place.
May I have a quick follow-up, Chair?
Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's okay, go ahead.
So Todd reached over and said, what about internet? So we will have the ongoing costs of the internet connections, and I believe that those are broken out. Or are they not? We're looking real quick.
Okay, while he looks, I'll add in this. No operating costs? It's hard to think of an office that doesn't have operating expenses.
So the request is currently constructed. There are costs within the AOC's budget account of over the biennium about $1.1 million. That would be for replacing the internet access that we get through OCIO's SilverNet. There's VPN that we would need to have and various other things. So there are some operating costs related to that. In the 1494 Supreme Court budget, there's a reduction to the SilverNet, because that's where that resides, of $847,000 over the biennium. So the net cost of the request itself is about $245,000. However, as Catherine mentioned before, we've looked at this just in the last few days and are prepared to meet with staff to discuss the potential of shifting gears and staying with OCIO for the moment. It's entirely possible that we would need to shift away from them in the future, but we've had to take a real hard look at this one with the information coming out of Washington on a national level that lets us know we may not be completely prepared for this. And we don't want to jump into a situation we can't handle with the cybersecurity, with the loss of all the federal support. You may have been, you've probably received a text or an email that looked legitimate at some point. Just yesterday, my 15-year-old son got a text on his phone that said his DMV registration was lapsed and that he would have to pay excessive fines if he didn't click on the link and take care of it. Fortunately, my son doesn't even have a learner's permit and certainly wouldn't have registered a car, and so he showed it to me and I said, no. But the attacks that we're seeing, and with less federal support, are getting so sophisticated. We have concerns about moving forward without another layer of protection that we have to admit OCIO does provide. So I think the costs you see here, if we did make the jump, about 1.1 in operating, the initial ask is a net cost of about $250,000, but we're not sure we're going there.
Okay, well, thank you. And I will say that's good of you to look ahead and look forward, because a lot of unknowns out there. So
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I think that's it for me.
Thank you so much. And also, I take it, and just to confirm, during your presentation on enhancement unit E292 regarding the Carson City Court camera surveillance system, I understand that the court is withdrawing that request for the $330,000.
Yes, that is correct.
Perfect. And with that, I will go to Assemblymember Anderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Sorry I missed it. I'm actually moving into 1494 as well. So the recommended funding would allow for the payment of settlement of fees of $1,250 per case for the 2025-2027 biennium. What is the current average settlement fee payment per case?
Thank you for the question. The maximum
Mr.
that
Myler, I don't want to be rude, but do you mind stating your name for the record when you answer questions? I missed it because, thank you.
Not at all. Todd Myler for the record, Todd Myler. I apologize for that. The maximum that the settlement judges are allowed to charge is $1,050. That consists of 10 hours at $100 an hour, plus up to $50 for supplies. The average number that they charge, the last time I looked at this, and it's been a little while, but the average number that they charged was hovering somewhere around, I want to say $870. I can certainly go back and look and get a hard number from this fiscal year and perhaps last fiscal year, if that would be worth the follow-up, but it was in the 800s range.
Follow-up, if I may. Who sets that maximum amount?
Todd Myler, for the record. That amount was set up in the rules of the program.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll go to Majority Leader Canizero.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think that you largely answered this at the beginning of the presentation, but I just want to make sure that we all are understanding it correctly. Can you talk to us a little bit about why new positions and increases in funding levels for salaries and benefits were included in the adjusted base instead of in enhancement decision units, which I think you talked a little bit about at the very beginning of your presentation?
Lydia Stiglich for the record, to the Senator. The original 8, at least how we viewed it, were part of the original appropriation. They're not an add-on to that. And as we understood, I appreciate that there's different ways to view it. One is by the bodies and one is by the money. And we looked at the appropriation as an amount of money and the freedom in SB 58 to make the hires that we needed and to adjust salaries as we needed as long as we reported. And we did do those things. So we did not include the 8 during the biennium because we didn't view them as an enhancement to our appropriation. That they were part of our appropriation just with the exercise of the statutory authority within that. So that's why those 8 positions aren't there. The new ones are an enhancement. As for restoring merit, again, we're prepared to work with the body however you want to do that and have those discussions about the appropriate amount of that increase in the appropriation, because that's what we're seeking is an increase in the appropriation, to your best discretion.
No, and I appreciate that. I think that is where there maybe was some question from the committee, right, is around that additional 8.4 million or so from the appropriation last biennium. But just so I think we're clear on that 8.4 additional, even though it's in the adjusted base as we see it, is really an enhancement for all the purposes we've sort of been discussing this morning. If we do not do an appropriation for that enhancement, you all would be prepared to live within the means of that original appropriation from that last legislative session with the folks that you do have.
Lydia Stiglich, to the Senator. Senator, we are prepared to live within our means, and so that was all taken into account, and without anything else, yes, we'd be able to proceed and meet our obligations.
Yeah, no, and I think that just provides us a little bit of clarity so we understand where that decision point is for the committee and that we could approve that additional amount of money in order to do some of the things that you've illustrated that you can do, but certainly would have the leeway to do with that additional money. So I appreciate that. And I think it makes sense. But I know that was a question for the committee about just the difference in it being in the adjusted base versus an enhancement piece, and then where those decisions lie for the committee. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Speaker Yeager.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here today and for the presentation. I have a couple of questions about the 8 new positions that were added in fiscal year 2024. I know you came in front of IFC, and I think we got the reports, but just wanted to ask a couple of specific questions. So number one, with the online information specialist, I remember back last session, there was a request that we approve a web content specialist and or judicial public information officer, but we ultimately did not approve that position last session. So my question is, this position, the online information specialist, is it the same like duties of what was asked for in the last session of the legislature, or do you envision there would be duties that are different from what was envisioned for the web content specialist and judicial public information officer?
Lydia Stiglitz to the speaker. Thank you for the question. No, they're different positions. The position of the web position is a tech position in addressing our website, the interface, and making sure that that's working. The PIO was a more front-facing traditional PIO position, so we did not fill that.
Thank you. And then one more, if I could, Chair. So you added the 8 positions in the interim. I guess the question is, what adjustments did the judicial branch make to other staff salaries to offset the increased amounts needed over the long term to support the new positions created during the interim with the funding that was made available for salaries? Does that question make sense? That the adding of 8 new positions is going to obviously have a long-term impact.
Lydia Stiglitz to the speaker. I'm going to start, and then anybody can jump in. With respect to that, given the funding, the allocation that we received, not everyone is to the max in our budget. In fact, a pretty small percentage, given the whole budget, are max. So there was room within the appropriation for us to add those over the course of time, is my understanding. And I'm going to defer at this time to the experts to my right.
Yes, I agree with that statement. Todd Myler for the record. We did look at that, and even with adding the 8, as was stated before, we can live within the appropriation we had. Long-term, going into this next biennium, if no increase is given, we can still live within that appropriation. So which adjustments were made to other positions? One thing that we focused on we wanted to ensure that our lowest paid employees were taken care of and received more of a living wage. And we were able to do that. Additionally, across the board, this body approved a 12% and an 11% COLA for all staff in the state. So all staff who weren't that front line that got brought up to at least a living wage also got the COLA. So nobody got left out of getting at least that. So all I guess I'll really say is that we managed it and stayed within it. And as Justice Stiglitz said, if nothing else occurs, we'll still be able to do that in the next biennium.
And kind of staying along those lines, because one thing that we were looking at is obviously there was like a whole realignment of all these different positions. And when we budgeted for a last session, we did it kind of at the max of where those individuals were at. However, now we're in a situation where people have now changed actual positions. And so within each of those positions, obviously, so the reclassified grades went higher, and so there would be each step increase, and so maybe they're not at the max. And I guess the struggle now that we're seeing is it's kind of, we're coming back and asking for those to be increased. And I know you had responded to my colleague that you could live within your budget, but I guess that's where we're just struggling, because that $8.4 million is made up not only of those new positions, but also for the various change of grades of various individual positions. So I guess you've kind of explained the thinking and going into that, but I guess at the end of the day, you were saying that you were able to live within your means, or if Justice Stiglitz wants to kind of add on, that'd be great.
Emily Kuhlman for the record, EMILY KUHLMAN. I I appreciate our justice for deferring this direction. So what we did last legislative session, and again, we were appreciative. We know we can stay within our means. We have not made promises to employees outside of where we currently stand, but we did a full classification review. So we looked at all the positions that were historically undergraded, that were below our peers across the different branches when we did that. With that classification review, I imagine that others are coming forward. I know the executive branch just did a full classification review as well of their positions. We were just 2 years ahead of that. So again, no promises have been made outside of there. We reduced the number of classifications that we have to really align with the metrics that are out there now. And yes, we are asking for a little bit more in that bucket, but it really is to just address what historically had not been done across our branch.
And Madam Chair, if I may add, I failed to mention before, and Todd Myler for the record, jumping in again and forgetting that wonderful direction. I'm going to get it, I promise. One thing that I failed to mention to the speaker in terms of adjustments that we made, while we did indeed give everyone those COLAs that was granted to every state employee, in order to make sure that we lived within that bucket, we did suspend the normal merit increases that is, even though we're not in the classified system, that is something that's built into budgets across the executive branch. It's just part of a normal course of business. We suspended that. So even though they got the COLAs, there were no other merit increases for our employees. And that's something that this is really what we're looking to reinstate. So even though we could live within our bucket if we got no more, we would be faced with a situation where there will be no merit increases again. And eventually, and I'm sure Emily could speak to this, that will catch up to us.
And if I may, Lydia Stiglitz, back to the speaker's question and to the chair, and we still reverted 1.7 million in '24 and are on track for substantial reversion here. We're really trying to be careful.
Justice Stiglitz, do you guys have an estimated amount? I'm assuming it will be less than the 1.7 million just because of maybe some increases, but any estimate?
It's not as, Todd Myler for the record, I am awful. I believe at this point we're in the $1 million realm. If the fiscal year ended today, we'd be around $1 million. So, but we're not fully staffed yet. We're always trying to be fully staffed. So that number is going to fluctuate, might go up, might go down, depending on how successful we are in filling.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Mr. Myler, and thank you for the extra Post-it. I think there's also a sign in front of you, but it's okay. I too fell at that. It's just a weird thing. If I'll go ahead to Senator Dondero Loop.
Thank you very much. It's my fault that she said there was a sign in front of you. So I apologize. So if approved, where will the two non-classified Supreme Court marshal positions be located?
That one, Todd Myler for the record, one would be in Carson City, one in Las Vegas.
Okay, how many are there now in Carson City and now in Las Vegas?
Todd Myler for the record. 5 in Carson City, 4 in Las Vegas.
Okay. And what major duties would the new specialty courts position perform?
Emily Kuhlman for the record. Our current specialty courts coordinator does all of the paperwork side of approving the documentation that she's receiving, answering the calls that are coming in every day. And these are all duties, kind of the administrative, clerical, operational tasks that we would like to transfer over to this administrative position, which will really open up the current specialty courts coordinator to focus on the broader funding, to get out to the different specialty courts and to have a greater impact across the state.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go to the point system. Ms. Coleman, 1. Mr. Myler, 0. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so much. We will go to Majority Leader Howdy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have some questions too, not to be confused with my colleague in the Senate's IT questions on E285. Mine are on E278, so IT positions as well. Now, and during the last legislative session, I know this body approved 6 new IT positions for the judicial branch, and then during 2024 year, the judicial branch added an additional 6. And now you're here requesting to convert, and I'm not sure, I'm gonna need some clarification on whether it's you're converting 6 contract positions to permanent or you're converting 7 to permanent. So I think that's my first question, because it looks like you're requesting 7 new permanent positions, but there's only 6 contract positions. So one, is it 6 or 7 that you're looking to add? And why isn't the addition of the 12 new IT positions sufficient to do the work needed?
Todd Myler for the record. To address the question of whether it's 7 or 6. Early on in the budget, as we were building it last summer, as we were contemplating lots of things, the number was initially 6. And unfortunately, as we progressed through the process, that little number in the narrative that said 6 was never caught. That's on me. It's 7. We are converting 7 positions, 6 of which are IT related, one of which is a criminal justice liaison, which we have. That position is, although discusses a lot of IT things, isn't necessarily an IT position. It works with our criminal justice partners to help us understand from a system standpoint how we can best work with the criminal justice system. So that one was added in later as we moved through the process. We realized when ARPA ends, we're still going to need that because we still need those conversations to happen. So it is 7, it's not 6. And as far as the duties go, I would defer to Paul Embley.
Paul Embley for the record. As you can imagine, well, maybe you can't imagine. I've been with the Supreme Court for 3 years now, or a little over 3 years. When I came in, let's just say that we had some legacy systems that were not being updated, and there was really no vision for the things that we could do. Prior to taking this job, I worked for the National Center for State Courts, and so I went around the country and sometimes around the world looking at what other courts had done, what they had in place, how they were using technology to better their processes. One example of that, we appreciate the funding that you gave us for a digital evidence system. That was never envisioned, but a digital evidence system, as you can imagine in today's world, where there's video, a judge needs to somehow get that video. Well, they're not going to, take your phone as evidence and put that in an evidence locker and you be without your phone. So we need ways of getting that digital evidence to the judge, to the parties, and so forth. So that's just one example of many things that we have put into place. We have built a team for, we call it the trial court services, but they have built a reputation where people actually want to use our state-sponsored system. That is great news, but it also comes at a cost, where Instead of servicing 32 courts, now we're looking at servicing maybe around 45. So it's things like that that has resulted in us needing an increase. We didn't have e-filing. E-filing, I think all of us know that that is something that we should just have. And we should have it not just for lawyers, but for any self-represented who wanted to use it. So it's all of those things combined together that have made us, increase our staff to what I would submit is reasonable levels. We can certainly do comparisons across the nation. There are some who get by with less, and I would strongly emphasize get by. Maybe they're not able to do some of the things that we're doing, but there are others who are similar size that have 3 times what we have.
And thank you, Mr. Embley, for giving me a visual. Now I'm obsessed with like the cloud trying to be put into an evidence storage locker. But in my mind, because now we're so technological advanced for digital evidence. With that, members, do we have any other further questions for the judicial staff? Oh, Ms. Anderson, Assemblywoman Anderson.
That's all good. Thank you, Chair. My question actually comes from Budget 1497, if possible. So it's towards the end.
We're going to switch out. Oh, different group. I was just making sure. I kind of had that feeling.
Coming attractions.
With that, I think we are all good. And I really, truly appreciate our justices, our administrators, both our IT and financial for answering all of our questions that we had today and for your presentation. And with that, we can go ahead and close the budget hearings on budget accounts 101, 1494, and 101, 1482. And you guys are released for us for today, and I'm sure there will be some follow-up conversations with our fiscal staff. And with that, we'll go ahead and open up budget 101, 1497, which is our Commission on Judicial Discipline. And I welcome Mr. Dial up to the dais and anyone else he's brought with him today.
Good morning. For the record, I'm Paul Dyla, P-A-U-L, D as in David, E-Y, H-L-E. Good morning, Madam Chair and fellow committee members. I am Paul Dyla. I'm the General Counsel and Executive Director of the Nevada Judicial Discipline Commission. I'm also the Executive Director of the Standing Committee on Judicial Ethics. Accompanying me is Valerie Carter, Administrative Service Officer and Deputy Director. Our budget, the Supreme Court's budget is $197 million. Ours is just a little over 1.2. So our presentation will be will be briefer for sure. As you know, the Commission is one of the smallest agencies in the state of Nevada. The Commission is so small, in fact, that we have been referred to in past legislative sessions by legislators as budget dust, compared to larger agencies such as the Supreme Court, DOT, DMV, et cetera. Although we are small, the Commission plays a vital role in the protection of the public and the promotion of public confidence in the integrity of the judiciary. To do so, it is crucial that the Commission receive critical funds and resources to enable it to carry out its constitutional and statutory mandates. The Commission budget is fairly straightforward. As such, I'm going to focus on our enhancements that we are requesting. I'd be happy to answer any questions or address any other areas of our budget that you may have. Included in our budget packet are detailed memorandums addressing each of our enhancement requests. As such, I'm not going to fully reiterate everything in those memorandums, but rather briefly highlight the major points of each one. Public safety and our first enhancement relates to public safety and infrastructure. This adds enhanced security measures during commission hearings and trials and ensures safety and well-being of the public, judges, witnesses, and the commission members attending hearings and trials. As right now, we have our hearings and public proceedings at the State Bar, either in Nevada, either in Las Vegas or Reno. Sometimes we cannot get into the State Bar, so we hold them in convention centers. One year we had to go to the UNLV campus, their moot court courtroom, to hold trial, and none of those venues have security. And we receive routinely threats against judges, threats against their lives. We, as staff members, receive death threats as well. As you can imagine, the public is not happy with judges if they rule against them. They're not happy with the commission if they dismiss a complaint against a judge that they felt was valid. So we believe the enhancements requested are reasonable to have security at the hearings and metal detectors, et cetera. Also, I will note that whenever we have a hearing, there's public notice, so everybody knows that judges will be there, commission staff, other witnesses. So it is important for their safety. The second request is for it's a non-classified reclassification to increase funding for 2 senior associate general counsel positions. These were formerly associate general counsel positions, and to request pay with the position's respective title, duties, and required qualifications. So these are very unique positions. I was in private practice for 14 years before joining the commission, and I can tell you that I didn't know anything about judicial discipline when I started. I was a corporate lawyer, intellectual property lawyer at a big firm, and it took me several years to get my footing. We have our own rules. We have our own judicial disciplinary jurisprudence that dates back to the 1970s. And we're talking a jurisprudence in federal courts, state courts, even the United States Supreme Court has weighed in on judicial discipline matters. And our attorneys, they just simply are not entry-level attorneys. We cannot afford to hire somebody right out of law school. They need to be familiar with and have practice experience in litigation, federal and state law. We get sued in federal courts too collaterally, and we need to represent ourselves in those courts. And we need to know every court, every court rule that there is in every court in this state. So we have to also know various practice areas, juvenile law, criminal law, probate law, you name it. We have to know all of those areas in order to do our job and to do our job well. So it's not a unique position, and we believe the increase from a 45 to a 47 would be appropriate. It's very difficult to attract attorneys to the commission, and sometimes we have a lot of difficulty. So it's very important that we are able to attract qualified attorneys as well as keep those attorneys as well. The third request is for, again, it's a reclassification of an existing MA2 position to an MA3 position. Again, for the same reasons that I've mentioned. This is a unique position. Our MA2 is a paralegal. They have to know everything about the court system in Nevada. They get phone calls from the press and the public. They have to maintain confidentiality of very sensitive information on judges. And it's very important that we are able to attract the best and most qualified. Also, because we are so small, we're a very, very small office, there's a lot of sharing of duties when needed. So if someone's sick, on vacation, or we're so buried in other work duties, people have to step up and do jobs in other pay categories to get things done. So we believe that the request from a 35 to a 37 is appropriate. And let me just add that we are non-classified. We are part of the judicial branch. We are an independent agency of the judicial branch, separate and apart from the AOC and the Supreme Court. And it's important. Again, as I said, I reiterate that we're able to attract the most qualified employees to represent the commission. That's our presentation regarding our budget. I want to thank you for allowing us the opportunity to present our budget this morning. And I would like to say on behalf of the commission and staff that we would like to thank you for your strong support, the legislature's strong support of the commission's mission, and for providing in years past the critical resources needed for the commission to do its job and do it well. So thank you very much, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much for your presentation, and with that, we'll go to Assemblymember Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. Now it's my turn. So what would the impacts to the commission's ability to review and actually complete its cases and investigate if those recommended position changes were not approved? How would that impact the work?
Paul Dyler for the record. This request is really to keep them here. There's a lot of pressure for other positions. It's difficult to attract people to the Judicial Discipline Commission, and pay is a very important component to that. And I know even with the Supreme Court in years past, they've lost a lot of staff members to private practice, and we're kind of in that same boat. So right now, how would that impact it? Hopefully those attorneys and staff members would stay. I have no guarantee that they would if given other opportunities, but we're doing okay now, but we just want to make sure that they have a strong support to stay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I just have a quick follow-up. And so for those two positions that for the attorneys that you're seeking for the enhancements, I noticed looking at some of our backup materials that from the Judicial Ethics Annual Report for fiscal year 22 to 24, there was actually an increase by 40%. I don't know if it was the number of complaints. I didn't know if it was number of cases versus number of complaints. And so just out of curiosity, for those attorney positions that you have you had to deal with vacancies over the last few years, or are they pretty much right now been the same attorneys holding those positions?
Paul Dyler for the record. We've had the same, the legislature approved 2 sessions ago a new attorney position, thankfully, because as you noted, the increase in complaints filed, not just the complaints filed, but also the complexity of the cases that lead to trials, et cetera, which is very unpredictable. Those positions, that attorney, it was very difficult to find an attorney to fill that position. We got at least a qualified attorney to fill that position, got a lot of resumes, and luckily we found an attorney that had the experience that we needed to fill that position. So very important that they have prior experience. It's not an entry level, and that's why we classified this as a senior, because that's really what it is. It's a senior position. We really can't, because we're so small, it takes so long to get, for me, as I said, I was a partner at a major law firm. I came in and the laws that I reviewed on a daily basis were on a yearly basis, corporate law, business, intellectual property. I came into judicial discipline. I really didn't know anything. So it takes a couple of years to really get up to speed, especially as lawsuits are filed. As I said, they've been filed in state and federal court. This is separate and apart, just attacking the commission itself as an organization or due process issues. That doesn't even speak to the complaints and our mission and what we do as far as investigating judicial misconduct, et cetera. So hopefully that answers your question.
It did. Thank you so much. With that, members, do we have any other questions for our Commission on Judicial Discipline? With that, I thank you two for coming out here today, sitting through a very other long presentation to get to your presentation. We'll go ahead and close budget account 101-1497.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And with that, we'll move on to our last item on our agenda, which is public comment. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to give public comment this morning? I don't see anyone making their way to the front. So with that, there doesn't appear to be anyone in Las Vegas for this morning's hearing. So AVH, is there anyone on the phone lines wishing to give public comment this morning?
Thank you, Chair. The public lines are open and working, but we don't have any callers to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you so much. And with that, I can go ahead and close this meeting.